recently about the shooting that took place on Yale Avenue, and I was wondering if there's any update on that that I missed, or any information that you would like to share regarding that shooting.
Okay, Bruce, I'll let Chief tackle the shooting issue. I can tell you with regards to Sam, because it's a personnel issue, we cannot discuss it. If you need to contact Public Works, Caleb, and Pat, help me with Caleb's last name.
Right now it's Mike Oxford. We're going through the hiring process for that, but
Okay.
he can contact me, and then I'll get him in touch with Mike Oxford in the short term until we finish that application process.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on mute, Chief.
Unmute yourself, Chief. Chief, unmute.
Sorry about that. Yes, all of that to say that there is really no new update. Again, this fatality that the question was about was reported as a suicide, as a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and there's been nothing to contradict that yet. We still are waiting for the final report from the medical examiner, even after this period of time. So there is no new update on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Pat? Anyone else?
I do not see anyone right now. Tony Conte just texted me and said, not sure how he's raised his hand, not raised his hand. So Tony Conte has a comment. Tony, go ahead.
He's muted still. There we go.
I just unmuted myself. Yeah, as a business owner on Market Street and as one of two representatives here with Downtown Camp Hill Association, I just wanted to thank Borough Council on behalf of the DCHA. Certainly thank the staff at Borough Council for the support that you've given to the business community. It is incredibly meaningful to us, and I think it's important that you all understand how much this does mean to us. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony, and we're glad you're a part of that group. Anyone else, Pat?
Not seeing anyone else right now.
Okay, well, there'll be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for a second set of public comments. All right, let's start with public safety. Erin.
Good evening. I want to start off by letting everyone know our next Public Safety Committee meeting is on October 22nd at 4:30. It will be via Zoom. If you are interested in attending that committee meeting, you can send an email to jhill@camphillborough.com to get a link to the Zoom. Mayor, would you like to present your report?
Sure. The police ran 760 calls in September. And they also conducted training on September 16th and 17th that was effective in constitutional policing. And it covered the following topics: constitutional policing, procedural justice and police legitimacy, bias-free policing, effective communication, de-escalation techniques, physical and mental preparation. And the training was presented by a well-known person, Randy Means. Attorney Randy Means is very accomplished in this type of training. So it's very good, and I commend Chief and the department for conducting that training. The fire department in September ran 31 fire calls, spent 76 hours on those calls. And I just want to say that this week is Fire Prevention Week, and we did fire prevention presentations to the schools virtually, which was pretty cool. We usually go to the schools, but we did it via Zoom, and it went really, really well. So just happy about that. So that's the report.
Thank you. That sounds cool. And I'm sure it shook up their day a little bit too. So the first item, well, the next item on the agenda is to discuss an advertisement on an ordinance placing a no right turn sign along State Route 1115, making it illegal to make a right turn traveling southbound on 1115 onto Crescent Road. So I just want to open up a discussion about that, and maybe Pat, you could give us a little history.
Sure. So when we talked about doing the HATS grant, we looked at some safety measures we could do to make that intersection safer for pedestrians walking from school. What we identified through that kind of the research there was that we needed to make some improvements to the ADA ramps and provide a crosswalk there, which was part of the HATS grant application. But as in conjunction with that, it was decided upon that we would be placing a no right turn southbound on the bypass to restrict people from turning right onto that road, because it's dangerous as you make that turn. There's kids walking into the street, they can't see the cars coming, etc. So in order to make that legal for the police department to be able to pull over for making that turn, we have to amend the ordinance to say as such. So we have ordered the sign. The sign will be installed in short order. We need to go through the bureaucratic red tape of making sure that it is legal for us to enforce that. So that's what this ordinance is, an advertisement is for, and then we'll be voting on it next month.
And just to add to that, this was like a discussion that's been ongoing for at least the 2.5 years that I've been on council with how to improve safety on Creston. We had a bunch of different options that HRG presented and, went through committees, and this is kind of where we landed as a good, very good starting spot, along with, I think painting a crosswalk, right, Pat? Is that the other piece of this puzzle? And I think we talked about this before, but I don't know if Pat said it in an obvious way, but we did receive a grant for this. Correct, Pat?
We did. The sign is not part of the grant. It's because it's a couple $100 sign. The rest of what you're talking about, the crosswalk, the ADA ramps, are part of the grant.
Mhm.
I'll also mention that because it's on a state road, we had to get PennDOT approval for the sign, and we received that at this point. So PennDOT has given us their permission to put it up.
And I think with all the history pertaining to this area of the bypass in general, and our students across the bypass coming to schools, this is a necessary step. And the more we do, and I have seen a lot of our crosswalks popping up, the better for our students and our residents. We're a walking town. So is there any further discussion? I would like to make a motion to advertise the ordinance, placing a no right turn sign along Route 1115, making it illegal to turn right, traveling southbound on 1115 onto Crescent Road.
Second.
that.
Okay. Any additional comments, thoughts?
Pat, when's the actual work set to begin? Sorry, Alyssa.
That's okay.
For the sign or for the grant as a whole?
No, just for the grant as a whole and the actual project.
You're stealing my thunder for the manager's report. But
Okay.
the long and short of that is Mike Hess, Kevin Fox, and I, Kevin Fox works with HRG, met with Steve Deck from Tri-County. There was some discussion about them being HATS and PennDOT, not letting the funding until 2022. So when we heard that, we proactively met with Steve and explained to them the desire for the Borough Council and Borough as a whole to have this work done in an expeditious manner. We talked to the representative from PennDOT as well as Steve, and they saw no issue with us commencing work in 2021 as soon as we have the signed grant documentation in hand. So the minute that I get the grant paperwork, I will sign it, Lee will sign it, we'll send it back to PennDOT, and we can begin that work and then draw the funds down accordingly on that project. So sooner than later, I'm glad it's not 2022, but it's definitely going to be something we focus on early 2021.
But the sign can the sign can go up before. This is just for the work on the road.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Mhm. Okay, oops, we done? Call the question then. All those in favor of the motion to advertise, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Erin.
Next on my agenda, I'd like to make a motion and have a discussion about the advertising of the ordinance to place a stop sign on Chestnut and 19th Street, creating an all-way stop.
So The borough is in the process of beginning construction on a pork chop at the intersection of 19 and Chestnut Street. HRG designed that, and as part of their design work, we did an analysis on placing an additional stop sign with that pork chop to make a more pedestrian, bike friendly, and better traversable pork chop near the Smith Land development. We've communicated that with Smith Land. All of that work's done. Again, we just need the bureaucratic red tape to be approved so we can advertise that and then approve it and then install the sign.
Again, this is a pretty historical piece of work we've been discussing and working towards. And with the development of downtown from Neighbors and Smith through Willow Park, I do expect to have more traffic and more foot traffic, vehicle traffic. So I think this is a great addition to the community as well. Any other thoughts, discussion?
All right, and you've made,
I've made a motion.
You didn't,
I second.
okay, I apologize. All those in favor of advertising the ordinance for the stop sign, please.
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. Anything else, Aaron?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay. All right, Borough Manager's report, Pat.
Got it. We talked about the HATS grant. The MTF funding DCED grant was submitted on September 30th. This was for the remaining balance of the streetscape project. We focused on drafting this grant with more of a economic upturn and the job creation aspect. The first grant was more about business revitalization. So we tried to draft it in a different way so we weren't just regurgitating the same document back to the same funding entity. So can't give you a percentage of getting it, but it's worth the exercise in doing it. So hopefully we get that and we can help offset some of the cost for the streetscape project. The construction has started on the Fiala Field baseball field upgrade. We've coordinated with the soccer club and the other individuals that use that to use the stadium. They only have one more game, but we wanted to make sure we didn't have any impact to their play. So that's been taken care of. The berm plantings will take place near the compost facility at the beginning of November. The trees are in the process of being ordered. They've been laid out. The arborvitaes have been laid out. The grasses have been laid out. The trees have been laid out. So hopefully we can get that done in the beginning of November, and in a couple years that will look very nice. The Saldo is going to be pushed forward to the Planning and Zoning Committee. Once they approve that, it'll go to council for advertisement. So we're moving that forward. The Borough and the West Shore Police Association have a tentative agreement. I'm waiting on one more revision back from the union steward from the police department, but that will be on the agenda for November. I will circulate that to council when I get the final draft copy. Draft numbers for the streetscape plan will be circulated to Borough Council in the upcoming days. Joe Nardella and his team from Gibson Thomas have worked with the feedback of Borough Council to come up with a cost proposal. Again, it'll be before you shortly. We are trying to schedule a meeting with them. I'm waiting for information back on Joe. What's the best time for his team to meet with council. Julie will be coordinating that with everybody moving forward. And the last thing I have is a budget presentation for council and the public.
Got it. Thank you.
I am going to share screen.
So Jennifer's here from Mayor Duzel, and she is going to go over our audit.
Correct. Yep. I'll get this done and then we'll. Okay. So can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go over the different funds and the different budgets, highlight some 10,000 foot things, not go too deeply into it. That's what for the next 3 weeks or 4 with special council meetings on the budget. But I wanted to kind of outline, as I did last year, what's being presented and what we're going to work through. So the first thing is a summary of the budgets. The borough budget is broken down in the general fund, wastewater fund, cemetery fund, liquid fuels fund, stormwater fund, which is regulated by the Stormwater Authority. There are 3 members of Borough Council currently on the authority and 2 volunteers, and then the capital improvement fund. The general fund is comprised of general government, which is the administrative arm of the government, police department, fire and ambulance, planning and zoning, Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and then general expenses. This includes your fringe benefits, pension benefits, other things like that. The sub-account, as I talked about, of general government, the allocations in this particular administrative fund are the solicitor, special legal counsel, which is a new line item because we've been spending money on a legal counsel. We needed to account for it somewhere. The tax collector, advertising of documents, maintenance of Prosser Hall in the Borough building, as well as the administrative salaries and payroll for those who are non-union in the administrative department. The 2021 general government budget includes repairs to Prosser Hall. There's some issues with the kitchen, the stove, as well as the sinks need some work. This line item has been reduced since we did do the entrance way this year, and this also the special legal counsel line item. So the total allocations for general government this year are $750,140. The largest increase in this line item, or this particular sub-account, is relative to the special legal counsel, which we're currently utilizing for the Chick-fil-A legal litigation. The next is the police department. This is where all police services are allocated. The majority of the police department, 86% of it, is comprised of staffing costs. That's the patrolmen, sergeants, lieutenant, and chief. The remaining 14% is focused on their communications training, fuel and maintenance and vehicles, and their capital expenditures, which include leases for their cruisers, as well as an addition to the capital line item in the general fund for police relative to body and car cameras. There are increases to the crossing guard line item as a result of attempting to hire new crossing guards, as well as allocating some funds towards park security officers. We've been having an ongoing issue with robes of kids.
Excuse me 1 minute. If somebody could please mute themselves if there's noise in the background where you are, because it's hard to hear
Pat, can you mute people for us?
Yeah, I'm working on that now. I'm gonna mute everybody for right now.
Okay.
Can you all see my screen? Can you give me a thumbs up? Perfect, thank you. So this include the line item for crossing guards has been increased for the additional intersections that were been discussed in the past, as well as hiring park security officers who can help with the ongoing issues that we've had with kids in the parks doing things that they shouldn't be doing. The next is fire and ambulance. I've outlined the last 3 years of allocations towards the fire department. This is at $115,000. I also make note that the borough has a hydrant fee of $32,000 that we are required to pay. And as we also pay workers' compensation for the volunteer fire companies. So the sum of this is about $268,000. Planning and zoning, the planning and zoning sub-account accounts for expenses through the borough's codified ordinances. This includes the codes and zoning officer, a part-time zoning or codes officer. In this particular budget, as we work through council, I've allocated funds for a full-time codes clerical support position. I offset some of the costs for that by reducing the part-time codes officer's hours. I felt that it was more important to have some filing and administrative support for the codes officer as opposed to an additional part-time person doing some work. There still is some hours allocated for the part-time officer, but I'm reducing those hours to help offset workload within the codes department and help with some filing and administrative things. The goal being to provide better resident feedback, information, and response to questions, comments, inquiries, and enforcement. Engineering expenses related to land development, vacant property remediation. This is people that walk away from their properties. And we have to send in Service First or any other vendor to lock up the property, fix the property, and then we lien the property once this is done. Legal advertisements and emergency management. So the total sum of that is $219,351. The next is Public Works. The Public Works sub-account are kind of broken out between different funds, the general sewer and liquid fuels. Public Works, we do have a wastewater fund, and some of the work that the Public Works employees do is relative to sanitary sewer. So we've traditionally outlined expenses for that in the wastewater fund, as well as liquid fuels. No salaries are paid there, but materials such as thermoplastic, crosswalk materials, patch, things like that are allocated there. So I've outlined what that's for: highway materials, snow removals, and liquid fuels. A percentage of Public Works employees, that's dispersed between 3 funds, including the stormwater fund now, tools, and maintenance of public works and vehicles. So from a general fund perspective, that's about $302,009. Parks and Recreation, one of the assumptions that Audrey and I made as we were compiling her budget, with that summer camps and camps will be taking place in 2021, we thought that it would be good to proactively allocate the funds and resources to them happening and then cut them and not spend the money. We would also not be generating the revenue, but we could reduce the expenses if it doesn't happen. Our hope is that they do. The summer camp program is heavily utilized, so we're hopeful that we can make that happen. Not really within our constraints at this point, but hopefully things make a turn for the better. And I've outlined that we pay for camp counselors, instructor, the recreation director, park maintenance and repairs. Say if somebody damages a slide, we'll pay for it out of the park maintenance line item, equipment replacement, and camp supplies. So we spend about $295,073 in the parks and recreation line item. And finally is general expense. This is the fringe benefits. This is healthcare benefits, the transfer to capital improvement that the borough set aside each year, liability insurance, community contributions. This goes to the library, Lion Foundation, and any other civic organization that would requested a donation. Workers' compensation, FICA, the contribution to the downtown board. I kept the allocation the same as last year, assuming that we are rehiring the position. That may be a decision of council that we do not, as that is currently in flux, but I wanted to keep the money in there in case there was a decision by the board to continue the previous downtown coordinator's position. And as well, there's a general fund subsidy to the stormwater fund in the amount of $350,000. So the total general expense, including those as well as a couple other line items, is $2.559 million. So one of the largest portions of the borough's general fund budget. So a quick general fund breakdown about where the money is allocated. About 44% is in general expense. That's the largest one, followed by the police, followed by general government, and then the fire department, parks and recreation, public works. And again, the public works one is a little misleading because the funds are allocated in 3 separate funds. So 5% of public works is made up in the general fund budget, but the other portion is in the sewer fund and the wastewater fund and the stormwater authority fund. So as we get through the expenses, we can talk about revenues. The largest revenues in the borough are real estate taxes, realty transfer tax, earned income tax, and the cable franchise fees. One of the major issues with this particular budget is that we had to make some assumptions relative to downturns in revenue projections based upon the COVID-19 pandemic. So a couple of the large line items that have been reduced are real estate taxes by $100,000, as well as earned income tax by close to $215,000. So while the remaining revenues are camps, permit fees, and reimbursements, and a healthcare reimbursement from Benecon, the largest ones are the 4 that I've outlined for you there. And unfortunately, due to COVID-19, there's some projections in the budget that are less than favorable. They are conservative. The earned income tax cut is about 15%. The numbers in the research that I did in preparation of the budget, depending on the type of city, organization, county, borough, township, you're ranging anywhere from 10 to 15%. So I chose to use 15% to be conservative. That number can be doctored a little bit as we work through the process, but I wanted to present the budget to council in a conservative manner. So our total general fund revenue is $5,353,124 general fund. So
Pat, another reason we think that's conservative is the EIT this year hasn't been down 15%.
No, the earned income tax and property taxes have come in. We're about 95% collected in terms of property tax and about 80% collected in terms of EIT. So we're not seeing a dramatic change in that. So again, erring on the side of caution, 15% is the number that I chose to use at this time. But that's a good point, Zach. 1 second. Oops. Oops. There we go. That's the one I want. Okay. So in the budget that was presented to council, the general fund allocation for capital improvement is maintained. If you look at the first bullet that I glossed over as I was answering Zach's question, revenues and expenses do not balance out. We're currently at a negative $620,208 deficit. Of that, $150,000 is new expenses. 100,000 of which is the legal counsel. So we really did, and staff did a good job of trying to hold the line on what their current budget requests were for 2021. That expense increase juxtaposed to the revenue forecasting that we've done, you're talking about a 20% revenue reduction, which puts us around $400,000, $415,000 in lost revenue, thus making up the $620,208 deficit that's currently presented that we'll be working collectively on through the next couple of weeks to get close to balance as we possibly can. We kept in line, no cuts to services, keep picking up the leaves, keep patching the potholes, keep providing recreational services, code services. No dramatic slashing was done at this period of time. We wanted to keep service provision the same as we were before. The general fund summary does include a cash allocation to the stormwater fund, as we discussed in years past. And the finance committee is recommending an adoption of a general fund and sewer fund balance policy. There's a slide on this towards the end that I'll touch on that briefly. That was provided, a draft was provided to council as well as a corresponding memo. What that would do is earmark unreserved cash into an account that would essentially be reserved, meaning that it would not be utilized to balance budgets, pay for operational expenses. It's essentially your emergency savings account in case something goes dramatically wrong and you need to keep the borough going. If we were to see a 50% reduction in earned income tax, or people weren't paying their bills, or et cetera. So that's what that is, but I'll touch on that briefly when we get to the end of the presentation. The borough has several enterprise funds: the sewer fund, cemetery fund, liquid fuels fund, swimming pool fund, and stormwater fund. The different aspect and why they're enterprise fund is their revenue is generated from user fees and rates. So sewer fund, you pay a sewer bill. Cemetery fund, there is no direct revenue source, but it is a revenue. We do collect fees from people if they are and choose to be buried in the cemetery. The liquid fuels fund is generated through a revenue from PennDOT. The swimming pool fund is revenues generated from pool passes, concession stand sales, and daily admission. And the stormwater fund is revenue is generated from the stormwater fee that is billed as part of the sewer fund. It's kept in a separate account and is only allocated for stormwater projects and operational expenses. The wastewater fund is the largest fund in the enterprise fund. The main revenue source of that is user fees. We generally collect between 97 and 99% of our user fees, and that's estimated at about $3.2 million. We do not have a sewer plant, but the fees we charge, we pay the Hampton Township about $1.6 million a year to treat our waste. The borough is essentially, for all intents and purposes, a large residential customer for Hampton Township per our agreement that was signed several years ago when the borough moved away from Lemoyne Borough sewer system to Hampton Townships. The borough utilizes fund balance. The borough had a very large fund balance, roughly $6 million several years ago, that was allocated for larger capital projects such as I&I work, construction, and pump station upgrades, as they were 40 to 50 years old and in dire need of improvement. We've been drawing down on that fund balance each year, close to $800 to $1 million a year. I've cut back on the wastewater funds I&I work. We've been doing consistently about $500,000, which isn't sustainable nor necessary. So I moved that number down to basically down to 350, meaning that we are still going to do some I&I work. We're still going to do some televising. We're still going to do some metering. But the cash allocation that's required to move from the borough's wastewater reserve fund is about $329,183. And when I say reserve fund, I mean we utilize sewer reserves currently as a capital improvement fund, as it were, for wastewater projects. So that is where that number is coming from. And the total sewer fund revenue is about $3.6 million, including that cash forward balance, as well as penalties and tapping fees, of which we are not a developing municipality, so we do not generate a large amount of revenue from tapping fees. As I glossed over quickly earlier, but this outlines the expense that we have. The largest expense is the payment to Hamden Township. So of that 3.6 million, 1.6 goes out the door to Hamden Township. We had debt that we had to absorb in 2012 and 2015. We did refund these bonds last year, generating quite a bit of savings for the borough. The current debt service payment we have for about the $19 to $20 million worth of work that was done for the upgrades when we went to Hamden Township is $981,530. Maintenance and repairs of the system from an operational perspective are about $75,000. The capital allocation for line improvements, as I mentioned, at $350,000. And then we run all of the leases through Public Works, through the sewer fund. That number was $100,000 last year. We just got done this year paying off the street sweeper, which was about a $240,000, $220,000 piece of equipment. And that comes off the book. So the leases for Public Works is $50,000, and we will not be buying any equipment. I discussed this with Public Works before I put the budget together, and it is not necessary at this particular time. So we saw some savings there as well. And now that the street sweeper's paid off, we give them $1, they give it to us, so we own that free and clear. The issue with Public Works equipment is you range from $200,000 in a street sweeper to $400,000 for a loader. So it can get quite expensive quickly, but we are in good shape at the present time. For future years of the wastewater fund, we can talk about this in the upcoming meetings. Sewer rates are low compared to other communities in the area, and they do cover operations and maintenance. If you take out any sort of capital allocation that we have towards the wastewater fund, we would be balanced. In fact, we would be saving, not saving, but being able to put the surplus back into reserves. But since we have capital allocations going through necessary improvements, the current paradigm that we're under with the rates where we're at is not sustainable. I'm not suggesting a rate increase at this particular time, but it is something council would want to entertain as we continue to have to put money into an aging system. Our rates need to be in line with that sort of capital improvement. If we don't have a stable rate structure where we can pay for those things, we're obviously going to draw down on the existing fund balance that we have within the wastewater fund. You can't do that forever. Eventually you run out of money and then you have to raise rates. I just said that in a longer way than the bullet point. And we do need to examine rates. We'll talk about this through the budget meetings that we have, but we do need to examine rates in the next couple of years to see if that's something that council would be interested in doing to help offset the improvements. I would not recommend not doing anything. There are communities that do nothing. But the number that we had in the budget was very helpful. But the $350,000 is what I feel is appropriate and a suggestion to council based upon discussions I've had with Hamden Township as it pertains to their level and expectation of maintenance on our system, and to ensure that we don't have any issues with them treating more than what our agreement allows us to do. Because if we do that, which has happened once, and we're currently in discussions with them about settling that. We had an act of God issue. They would debate that, but we don't want to get hit with a fine that can be in excess of $1 million if we don't be somewhat proactive with improvements. And as I said, we need to examine rates as we move forward the budget process this year, next year, and in the future years. The next enterprise fund is the Liquid Fuels Fund. This is subsidized by a liquid fuels grant. That grant award is about $233,000. That's down from $259,000 last year. Unfortunately, PennDOT, as anything, is experiencing issues with disbursements of funds. So we took basically a 20 to 25% reduction in what we had from last year. A lot of discussions took place during the public safety meetings that we've had the last couple of months about pedestrian improvements. I wanted to ensure that the appropriate level of materials were allocated to do increased crosswalk painting, thermoplastic installation, which isn't cheap. $3,000 a crosswalk, money goes by quickly. So if you do the math on that, 4 crosswalks at an intersection, you're talking $12,000 to $15,000 an intersection, depending on the type of crosswalk you do, continental, your basic ones, etc. So we have about $500,000 in liquid fuels reserves. In the budget, we have a pulling from reserve of $56,135 to increase the street markings from the $60,000 we had last year to $100,000. The largest expense in this particular budget is streetlights. We use our streetlight or our liquid fuels fund to pay our streetlight fee. That's not uncommon, but this is the largest single line item in that particular budget. Swimming pool fund, the largest revenue from the pool is general admission, which is about $140,000. The pool is expensive. It's important. It's a large community benefit, but it is expensive, and it requires a lot of yearly operational maintenance in order to provide a safe environment. So Audrey and I were discussing this yesterday or the day before. The borough put restrictions on resident access, only resident access this year. And we were looking at the pool losing between $55,000 to $70,000 based upon revenue projections of how many people would buy passes, et cetera. What we found is people bought passes. We sold about half as many passes as we did last year. The pool was never really that crowded. People bought passes and didn't go. Don't know why, but they didn't go. So we ended up with about a loss of $44,815, which is good. All things considered, some pools run that loss yearly. We traditionally do not lose money. We break even. Maybe lose $1,000 here, gain $1,000 there, but that was an exciting, while it's a loss, an exciting win for that particular subsidies. So the total pool fund is $176,750. The stormwater fund, this newly created fund in July 2020 was the creation date, is subsidized by fee revenue as well as a general fund subsidy. The current average total is $10 for most people. Some people have a little bit lower, some people have higher, depending on the tier. This was done through aerial work. We have some good aerial mapping. We haven't had a ton of stormwater appeals. We've had some people apply for credits, not many. So most of the time, the appeals so far, just for the edification of council, have been based upon individuals not calculating their sidewalk as part of impervious coverage, which it is, as well as stone driveways that people have packed down. Those that also counts towards impervious coverage. So that is operational. We have collected revenue from that. Our first billing was in July. It was a lot of work to get that done. We got it done. It was billed. Next year, the budget denotes 4 quarters of collection as opposed to 2. As I stated, the projected revenue for 2021 is $614,000 per the draft 2021 budget. We have a $350,000 general fund subsidy, meaning a total revenue of about $993,000 in change. Some of the expenses for the stormwater fund are primarily focused on salaries of employees doing and their benefits for doing work related to the MS4 and stormwater construction pipes, all the things outlined with that. We do have a $120,000 outline or outlay for public works projects that are small projects that we wouldn't have to borrow money to do. They are smaller in nature, fixing inlets, things like that. And we are talking about, from the authority level, borrowing money for some projects that I'll outline on the next slide. The debt service payment, there is a line item for that in 2021's budget that is set at $0. The debt service payments would not come into play until 2022. So the 2021 projects that the Stormwater Authority is looking at doing as part of a borrowing would be the North 25th Willow Park bypass pipe, the pipe upsizing under Willow Park. Those are both being done with cash that is currently allocated in the borough stormwater fund and will be paid for different and separately than the borrowing that we'll be doing for the inspection of the borough's entire stormwater system. What this will do is it will allow the authority members, the engineers and staff to take a larger picture of what needs to be done and prioritize things on a needs basis as opposed to a more mental or assumed basis. So we'll have good qualitative data and quantitative data to be able to work with the authority on selecting projects that are the most necessary. Seabrook Park stream restoration. This is similar to Willow Park. It will not have the intensity of the riparian buffer, but this project will help with MS4 credits, and will again create a buffer between the walkway and park area into the Seabrook Park stream that's there. That's what that is. The North 21st and Walnut Street project is $150,000, and there's a culvert that we need to do some work on Russell Road. So the ones that I've underlined are the ones that are going to be part of the public debt or bank loan, and we'll be working through that in the next couple of months through the budget process to do the appropriate RFPs, advertising, and selecting of the appropriate entity to borrow that money. So the debt service will come into play in 2021, but these are the projects that are slated to be done as part of that next year. So the next is the Capital Improvement Fund. The borough transfers $1.2 million from the borough's general fund directly to the Capital Improvement Fund as its main source of revenue. The two main sources being cash forward balance from the previous year and then this allocation. The projects, I should say 2021, you'll have to excuse me, are facade grants, police camera upgrades, the Market Street project, which will require debt at this point. We did submit a grant, as I said, during the borough manager's report to offset the cost of that. If we do not get that, it will obviously mean we have to come up with the remaining balance elsewhere, which will mean taking out a loan. That loan will be determinant upon what the total cost of that project will be. Council is currently working through that. And when we have a final number for that, the appropriate level of borrowing will take place. Construction will take place in 2021. We'll most likely, because of COVID, have to get a time extension from DCED to complete the project, which shouldn't be an issue. I've already talked to them. And the debt will come into play in 2022. Other projects include the Eisenhower Walkway, Creston Road, and bypass improvements. These were all done under the HATS grant that we talked about earlier during my report. This will be done in 2021. The match for these projects has been allocated in the Capital Improvement Fund. And then the pedestrian improvements, additional pedestrian improvements, crosswalks, etc. The total fund expenses are $5,973,332. The wastewater fund is $3,610,000. Liquid fuels $294. Swimming pool fund $176. Stormwater fund $596, and capital improvement fund $3406. So the total funds come up to about $14,057,704. So the fund balance policy. I provided a draft fund balance policy and memo to council. What this does is it provides guidelines to council, future councils, to ensure adequate reserves and fund balances, meaning that your savings accounts have a reserve level of cash that is kept untouched to make sure that if the world were to explode any more than it already has, that we would be able to keep operations going. The goals of that are to establish the reserve cash balance that's not allocated towards expenses. As I said, it minimizes financial risk for unforeseen fluctuations, and it also helps the borough maintain its current good bond rating, as well as it may even improve the borough's bond rating. Moody's likes to see that you have fund balance policies, so council, staff, whatever, aren't pulling from reserves as a means to balance the budget constantly, or they're constantly running deficits accordingly. A memo and draft policy was dispersed to council prior to the budget, and this will be a topic of discussion as we move through council discussions moving forward. The budget meeting schedule is set as October 21st at 7 o'clock, October 28th at 7 o'clock, and November 4th at 7 o'clock. These are all publicly advertised meetings. The public is welcome to attend, but these are the next steps as we move forward through the budget process. That's it. Anybody have any questions?
That was very detailed. Thank you. That was a prequel to the budget meetings.
It's you eat, live, and sleep and eat it. You know, it's just it's fun stuff.
Right.
You know, everybody read the memo on the fund balance policy that Pat sent out last week, because that helps explain. You know, the finance committee's been talking about that for a couple months now, trying to make sure that we really want to do that, and I think we do. So that helps explain how we got here.
Pat, anything else in your report?
No, that's pretty much it.
Good, thank you. Okay, Jennifer, if you want to unmute yourself and give us a brief update on how our audit was.
Yes, Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's safe and well. So I'm Jen Kruber-Kibbe, the principal at Mardissel. Just wanted to briefly go over the 2019 audit results. We audited the modified cash basis financial statements of the borough, and we issued what's called an unmodified opinion. It is the best opinion that the borough can receive, and it states that the financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting, which that is a special purpose framework other than accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So the borough is cash basis, their financial statements, similar to how you budget. The only modification is the investments held are reported at fair value instead of cost. And if there are due froms between funds, that is shown as an asset and liability. And this is the same opinion as given in the prior year. There was a change in accounting principle during the year. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is called GASB, they're the authoritative body that the borough has to follow in reporting and financial presentation. And there was a new GASB that was applicable for fiduciary activities where it redefined what an agency fund is. And the borough previously had an agency fund reported in the 2018 financial statements. That asset and liabilities just absorbed into the general fund in accordance with the new GASB. But that was the only substantial accounting principle change during the year. In the financial statements, similar to the 2018, there are some combining fund information back schedules, which we did provide in relation to opinion. And there's also some other information, the historical pension information. We do not subject auditing procedures, and we do not opine on that information similar to the prior year. Our responsibility is to express an opinion about whether the financial statements prepared by management are fairly presented in all material respects in conformity with the modified cash basis of accounting. Our audit of the financial statements does not relieve council or management of their responsibilities. Other than the adoption of that new accounting statement 84, there were new accounting policies adopted, and the application of existing policies were unchanged. There were no significant transactions entered into where there was a lack of authoritative guidance. The most sensitive estimates affecting the financial statements are the fair value of investments. There were no sensitive disclosures affecting the financial statements. There were no significant difficulties in working with management performing the audit. We did have one material misstatement that we proposed to management just to correct a year-end balance between the waste fund and the general fund to record it due from and categorize the expenses of the proper fund. That was reviewed and approved by management, but other than that, there were no other material proposed journal entries that we made. There were no disagreements during the course of our audit. We did request and receive a representation letter from management similar to the 2018 representations. There were no consultations with other accountants regarding auditing or accounting matters. And we do discuss generally a variety of matters, talking about accounting policies and principles, auditing standards with management prior to retention. However, those discussions were in a normal course of our professional relationship. Some financial highlights for 2019. So for the governmental funds, the presentation of the financial statements, what's deemed a governmental fund is different than how the borough budgets, but that's just in accordance with the Government Accounting Standards Board. So your governmental funds include your general funds, swimming pool, capital improvements, liquid fuels, and parks and recreation. So the total of those funds did see a net loss during the year of approximately $328,000. And one thing to also note, because the financial statements have to be presented in accordance with GASB, your general fund is a combination of three funds. It's your general fund, your swimming pool, and a capital improvements. And so any large capital projects that's seen and budgeted in the capital improvements is shown in the general fund column of the financial statements. So for the revenues for the general fund, they were relatively stagnant comparing 2018 to 2019. The most significant was a $200,000 grant that was received for the Willow Park improvements. And there was also significant increases due to the capital improvements and legal fees during the year. The largest capital projects that did take place in 2019, you had infrastructure improvements of approximately $750,000. Schaefer and Beverly Parks was about $763,000. Stormwater improvements of $488,000 and compost dump site of $500,000. The general fund did budget for a loss in 2019 of approximately 305, but actual results were the loss was higher at 444, and that's due to the significant increase in legal fees incurred in 2019. Your proprietary funds are your sewer and your waste, and the total net loss was approximately $1.35 million. A majority of that is due to the capital improvements expense of 1.4 in 2019. And Pat did already mention there's a footnote disclosure in the financial statements. Note 7 talks about your debt. So there's some additional information on the refunding of the 2019 bond issue. And there's also a subsequent event disclosure in the financial statements talking about the coronavirus, the pandemic, and essentially stating that the extent of the impact on the borough's operations and financial performance is uncertain. It cannot be predicted. That was included in all financial statements that were issued in 2019. And there's also a subsequent event disclosure about the 2020 bond issuance as well. And as part of our audit, we do gain an understanding of the borough's internal control in order to assist with planning and designing their audit procedures. However, we're not required to opine on the effectiveness of internal control. However, if we come across best practice recommendations or matters that we deem a deficiency that would rise to a significant deficiency or material weakness, we're required to report that to the board. And I did mention that material proposed adjustment that was included in the management letter. And we did have some best practice recommendations on strengthening segregation of duties for cash receipts and disbursements, as well as recommending a formal cybersecurity program, because training your employees are your #1 defense upon against cyber attacks. Did anybody have any questions over the information or the audit itself?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so while we're on the topic of finance, Zach.
So we'll pay the checks quick and then we'll talk about the audit. So first order of business, I'd like to make a motion to pay the checks for September in the amount of $1,575,803.97.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Zach?
I'm just looking at the check register. I just had a question. Did we have like wildlife control issues here in the borough? Because I saw a check for $1,695.
Yes, we did. We had them at various borough-owned locations that had to be dealt with because they were doing damage. And in one point, we had wildlife that actually chased some borough residents.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And let's see. The other question I had was Charlie's septic service, $1,300. Do we have like?
We are unable to open our restrooms at this time. So we had a hard time back during the onset of COVID because everybody was doing the same thing where they were bringing in portable hand washing stations and toilets and things like that to accommodate the public. And we had a real hard time finding those and getting anybody to want to deliver them to us. So I made some calls and we ended up finding this gentleman who ended up being willing to accommodate us. So that's what those are for.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of payment for the September checks, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, Zach.
Okay, so for item B, so we invited Jennifer to come here and present the findings of the audit and to accept the audit. I think the borough had done this previously, and then the last few years it seems like we might have gotten away from it for one reason or another. But I think it's good practice. Finance committee thought it was good practice to kind of have this update. And I think one of the things that we've been discussing in finance committee the last few weeks and months is, as Jennifer said, we did run a deficit, and it's important to note that when we pass these balanced budgets the last few years, that doesn't always mean that's exactly how the year goes. And, we've had high legal fees, as we've talked about with, litigation. We've had, I think, higher than estimated engineering fees because we just have a lot going on. So, part of all these discussions was, one, to get back into a practice of accepting the audit. Two, I think, Pat and Finance Committee are going to work to give kind of quarterly updates on budget to actual so that people can see, again, that just because we pass a balanced budget doesn't mean that over a 12-month period, everything goes right. That's not how it works. So I think we just need to get in the mode of, seeing that and realizing it more. And so that kind of spins into why we're talking about this fund balance policy. So again, we're not going to talk about that tonight, read the memo, and then we'll get into that next week at the budget meeting. So I guess I will make a motion. I don't know, is that what we do? Isaac, do we make a motion to accept the audit?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the 2019 audit.
Second.
Second.
Any other comments, questions?
Have we all received the letter summarizing the findings that were just reviewed?
It's at the office. We haven't received it personally.
If you want a copy of it, Alyssa, I can send it to you.
Yeah, that was a lot to process, and I would like to read it over. And I would be interested, sorry, I was still thinking while we moved on from questions about your audit, the recommendations that you made where we could improve or where best practices were not in line with what we were doing. You said there was one major one or one significant one?
Yes, that was the material entry that we proposed, and that was corrected and approved by management during the course of the audit. But because
what does that mean, the material entry?
It means that
we had to propose a material correction for the waste fund to record a due from between the waste fund and the general fund. And because that was found during our audit procedures and it wasn't corrected already before we got the trial balances, that's why we had to report it out to the board and let them know that we proposed that adjustment and that it was reviewed and corrected and approved by Pat and Ray.
Okay, did you make proposals to how things should be done differently in any areas moving forward? Like, is that part of the audit? Like, there's advice in that letter that we should read and understand and make sure is implemented moving forward?
Yes, it's what's called the management letter, and Pat does have that information.
Okay.
You mentioned
that might be interesting to see.
Yeah, you mentioned cybersecurity and something with cash.
Yes, just strengthening the segregation of duties over the cash receipts process as well as the cash disbursements process. And there's more detail in that letter that's included.
Okay. All right, we'll look at that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And those were just best practice recommendations. So the cybersecurity, the segregation of duties, they're what's called an other matter. So they're best practice just to strengthen your internal controls. It's not at a level of a material weakness or significant deficiency.
Okay.
One of the things that we did, Alyssa, after that was, to Jennifer's point, is that invoices would be directly sent to the finance department for payment. And then when they were received, I would get them when they were done, when the checks were done and the invoices were there. So now when the invoices come in, I initial all the invoices that come into the office and then they get sent to Ray. So we added a step of, okay, I see this now. There's a separation of duty between Ray seeing the expense, telling me about the expense. Now I see the expense first, it goes to Ray, and then the check gets cut. That was one of the things that we talked about after the audit.
Good questions. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to accept the 2019 audit. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
All right, that's it.
Okay, Bonnie, Public Works.
Okay, I'm going to let Mike give his engineer's report and then I'll run through the motions.
Okay.
Okay. First item on my engineer's report is for the 2020 sewer rehabilitation project. Bids came in for that in late September. We got 6 bids that were pretty closely clustered. They range from about 320,000 to 380,000. We received documents from the low bidder and found them to be in order. So we have a recommendation to award that contract. It would be to Mobile Dredging and Video Pipe Incorporated.
for the base bid plus 4 alternates for a total cost of $321,577. Do you want me to run through the rest, Bonnie, and then do motions at the end, or do them as they go?
Well, we can do a motion on this, and then if anybody has any questions. So I'll make the motion for the 2020 sewer rehabilitation project. HRG is recommending that the contract be awarded to Mobile Dredging and Video Pipe Incorporated for the base bid and bid alternates 1 through 4 in the amount of $321,577. Conditioned upon the receipt of acceptable bonding and insurance documents. So that is the motion.
Second.
Any other questions for Mike?
Yeah, Mike, maybe I'm just forgetting, but I mean, this was a big dollar amount. What is this project?
It's a very fair question. This is all associated with the I&I effort that the borough is undertaking to get those types of flows out of the system. We did CCTV inspection of an area south of the bypass and identified a number of pipe runs where there are I&I opportunities. And so we're recommending lining in specific areas, manhole rehabilitation, and in, I think, 3 locations a dig and repair. The areas that we're talking about are all tributary to the Siebert Park pump station. The base bid is the area south of the bypass, roughly across the bypass between the underpasses. So in that neighborhood is where we have most of the repairs. Alternates 1 through 4 are in a different area. They're all 4 of those alternates are in the same area, but those are over in the area of Parkside and Apple Tree Road. Same type of work, same sanitary sewer lining and manhole rehabilitation.
And so these are the actual projects we already televised and found the problems, and now we're fixing the problem.
Correct. Yeah, this is the lining work itself. The CCTV work was done to inform where we needed to line. This is for the lining itself.
And since this is a bigger dollar amount, Pat, I think we had like 500,000 budgeted last year for
550. Yep.
Does this fit within that, or are we going?
No, that fits within it.
Okay, so this isn't in addition to the like 500 that we had budgeted.
No. This project is towards the end of the year.
Yeah, this is part of it. Okay,
Yep. We're not doing $1 million. We're doing what we said we were going to.
So I have one question, Mike. So when you say lining, so we're not replacing any pipes. We are literally putting a liner in the pipes?
That's true. Yeah, for 95% of the project, it is lining. The contractor can go in through the manholes. There are a lot of different types of lining that can be used. In most cases, it goes in kind of like a sock turned inside out, and then it turns right side out with air pressure or water pressure into the pipe. And then it's cured and hardens using steam, heat, UV, depending on the specific liner involved. So that's the approach for the vast majority of it. There are a handful of spots that would be a dig and replace repair, and those are where we have a problem that can't be fixed through lining. So in one example, there's a break in a line with another object coming into it, a tree root coming into it. That we really can't line it around. We have to dig that up and replace that section. But those are spot repairs. Those are 5 or 10 feet long. For the most part, it's a lining project.
Okay. So what is the estimated duration of liners?
Well, it's a hard answer. It's a hard question to answer because there are a lot of variables involved, a lot of which have to do with the carrier pipe, the condition of the carrier pipe. We think that for a project like this, if we're going to recommend a lining fix in good faith, it's got to be a 40 to 50 year lifespan at least. Otherwise, it's really not worth it to line it. Then we're pretty much in the realm of replacement.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion carries.
Okay, the next item that I have on the engineer's report is the 2020 paving project, which is winding down at this point. Paving work is done, curb and sidewalk work is done, striping work is wrapping up. We don't have the paperwork from the contractors in time for this meeting to process their final payment applications, so we're not requesting any action on that one. But we do expect that they're going to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed to close out those contracts next month. Also, under the heading of paving and roadway, there's an emergency repair occurring at the corner of 17th and State Street. As you probably all know, PennDOT's working on a project in that area. As they were digging to form the curb on that corner, they encountered a drainage pipe which pretty much disintegrated and caved in as they excavated. We reviewed the camera footage and found that the pipe was severely deteriorated. The top of the pipe was gone, basically, and the roadway, the stone under the roadway was falling into the pipe. So we worked with Pat and authorized Rogel, who is the borough's emergency contractor. You recall last month we reauthorized their emergency contract for that bid, and just in the nick of time because this happened last week. So they're on the job getting that fixed. They should have that wrapped up by the end of next week. Next item, Challenger Baseball, I think Pat mentioned is under construction and proceeding well. Next item, and this is one where I'm going to have a requested action, is for the 19th and Chestnut pedestrian refuge island. We opened the bids for this job on October the 8th. We got 8 bids, which were pretty well clustered in the range of 75,000 to 100,000. There was one outlier who was double everybody else, but for the most part, they were pretty consistent. We have reviewed the low bidders documents. We found them to be in order. That low bidder is Mid-State Paving and Excavating, and their bid is in the amount of $75,296.30. We recommend that the bid be awarded to the contractor in that amount, conditioned upon receipt of acceptable bonding and insurance documents.
Okay, so I'll make a motion for the 19th and Chestnut Street pedestrian island. I recommend, or HRG recommends, that the contract be awarded to Mid-State Paving and Excavating for the amount of $75,296.30, conditioned upon the receipt of acceptable bonding and insurance documents.
Second.
Thank you. Additional questions for Mike? All right.
No, I just want to say I'm really going to miss, going southbound, coming to that intersection and trying to figure out if anybody's coming down Chestnut Street there.
Who's stopping? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, motion carries.
Okay, getting near the end here. Creston Road right turn restriction we talked about in Pat's manager's report, so I won't rehash that. And Pat also covered the conversation that we had with Tri-County Regional Planning Commission about the HATS grant, so I won't belabor that point either. And that's the end of my report.
All right.
Hey, and I had just one thing to comment on, and perhaps you can finalize this for us, Mike. You had sent an email regarding maintenance for the Willow Park, requesting whether we could mow it a couple of times a year until the canopy of trees grows to cut down on the weeds and such. Did you get a final response on that?
I got a response from one department at DEP. I'd love to get a response from the other, so we'll follow up with them, but I think that they're going to be consistent with the first response, which was to say that we would be permitted in that quote unquote no mow zone to do limited cutting of vegetation. We cut it down to a height of about 8 inches using handheld equipment and do it twice a year, once in the spring as the shoots are emerging, and then again in the fall. And there are specifics in the email that I sent to DEP. So it sounds like they are going to allow us to do a little bit of maintenance in there to, I think, alleviate some of the concerns over the appearance.
Okay, good.
That would be, anything in my opinion would be an improvement. So that sounds like a big improvement step anyway.
Good.
Thanks for following up on that. Anything else, Bonnie?
No, we have not set another meeting yet for Parks, Public Works. We're still waiting on a response from PP&L regarding Kelvin.
Yep.
On this suggestion they have for replacing our street lights to LED. And I think the other thing that we're still waiting on to review are the changes to the cemetery rules so that we can put the military plaques on the columbarium. So
Great.
we will schedule one hopefully next month.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, Carl, community and business relations.
Thank you, Lee. I have a very brief report tonight. Pat actually mentioned a couple of these things. So on the streetscape, we should be setting up a meeting very soon to go over the revised plans, including the costs. This is important because we want to get this moving so that we're constructing in the spring. And obviously the costs we have to consider as we go through the budget process in October, November. Second item, Mary Beth Brath, who was serving as the downtown coordinator, did resign. We are discussing with the Downtown Camp Hill Association how to proceed with that. You know, when Mary Beth started, the DCHA didn't exist. One of the things she did was help bring that to fruition, and it's been a great organization. So, you know, now that DCHA exists, it's very important that we work in concert on how we go forward with that. So more to come on that one. And I'll end with some good news. I think mentioned last month that Cocoa Creek Chocolates opened. And then this month, after a few delays and much anticipation, the Watershed Pub opened, the satellite of Millworks, I guess you would call it. It's a very nice place. And you know, I think Market Street continues to grow and improve, and that's great to see. That is my report.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Erin, Parks and Recreation.
Okay, Parks and Rec, I want to just go over our Halloween costume contest. We are not having our parade this year, but we are still having a celebration on October 27th, and any children and adults and families and pets are welcome to register and come in costume, mask required, social distancing. But we will have two locations, one at the Borough Hall and across the street at the fire company, where the themed contest will be happening. Themes like superhero, princess, spooky, original, pets, funny, COVID mask category, and our family group. So they start from 5 o'clock and they go all the way through 8 o'clock, and we hope to really enjoy and give it a chance for everybody to dress up, or another chance depending on your family's choices. But that is on Tuesday, October 27th. You can check our website for more information, or contact Parks and Rec. But that sounds like a really fun time. So thank you for organizing that, Audrey and commission. Another thing I wanted to note is the volunteer award that the borough gives out every year at our December council meeting. All applications, or what is it, the word? Nominations, thank you, are due by, I believe it's November 2nd, to the borough office and Parks and Rec, so that we can review, the commission can look over, and we can choose our award winner for this year. They do not need to be, there isn't a whole lot of specifics. It's volunteer. We have a tremendous amount of unending volunteer work in our borough, for the extending area, students, residents, etc. So send in your nominations and get them in promptly so we can look over those. And I appreciate everyone who has done work in the borough without pay and continues to do so. Now I'd like Audrey to give us a little update on our Toys for Tots celebration for this season.
Thanks, Erin. So in place of our Toys for Tots parade, we're going to have a parade of lights for Toys for Tots. I reached out to Centric Bank, and they normally would sponsor the Mummer Band that would come from Philadelphia, and they have said that we can use that money to go towards our event in Seabrook Park. So what we're going to do is have everyone who wants to come and donate a toy, they could come to Seabrook Park. We're having clubs, organizations, businesses, the fire company is helping as well, decorate Seabrook Park. And then people, for the admission to come see all the lights, they donate a toy for Toys for Tots. And ABF Freight has offered to have 2 of the cubes like they have at the Borough building, for us to collect all the toys in during this 3-night period. So between 6 and 9 p.m. on December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, people can come in to the park through the North 25th Street entrance and then go up past the tennis courts, drive past the playground, up to the cabin, down the big hill, and then come back out the hill coming by the pool, going down out of North 25th Street again. So I think there's a lot of excitement about it. I've already reached out to the high school. There's a lot of clubs and organizations inside the school that really want to get involved. High school teams want to do a volunteer project or community project. Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, they're all on board. They're making floats that will be there. We're decorating different buildings that are in the park. So I think it's going to be great. Mark Simpson's been huge in helping me meet in the park and hear my ideas and not tell me I'm not crazy. So I really appreciate his help. And there's a couple other residents who are really involved. Gary Weenie, who most of you know, is also very knowledgeable of doing lights and music, and so they're really helping this make this happen. So I'm hoping you all support this idea.
Audrey, I think it's awesome, and what an example of, in this time, making lemonade out of lemons. It's fabulous. I'm sorry it's only one weekend. I wish we could do more, but I'm sure it'll be packed.
Yeah, we're doing it the one weekend so that we can get all the toys to the children.
No,
I think it's going to be awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Erin?
That is all I have.
Okay.
Just the one thing, I'm sorry, that we do have 3 openings for the Rec Commission. Anybody who wants to apply can do so by December 1st to the Recreation Office, submit their cover letter and resume. Sorry, Erin.
No, thank you for reminding. December 1st.
Very good. All right, thank you. Okay, Richard, Planning and Zoning.
Thank you very much, Lee. Your monthly reports in the packet. I want to make note of a couple of things. We have $8.4 million construction permits this year for this month, majority of which is the school at $5.3 million. ADM is doing $1.6 million worth of work. And Trinity Lutheran, they're doing $770,000 of upgrades. I'm not sure exactly what the upgrades are, but that's a significant amount for Chestnut Street.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to point out is we had another code violation. Chris had to go out and look to another illegal restaurant running out of the house again on North 19th Street. That's not the first time, unfortunately, we've had that in the borough. But I appreciate him, the staff, and the police going up there and taking care of it. Second item on there is discussion of possible retainage for the Quattro development. And I'm not sure, Chris or Pat, you want to talk about that first for me?
Sure. So I'll give you the outline of where we are, and then Virginia can give you the specifics. So Quattro has been done for a while, and a couple months ago, council took action to lower their retainage from a very large amount to the amount that we are currently at, which is about $69,000. There are a couple of things that need to be done relative to their landscaping. Some of the trees are dead, and they didn't plant the right caliper of tree when they planted them. So the suggestion that Virginia is going to go over is reducing the contingency that we currently have as part of their retainage by half, and then keeping about $4,000 in retainage until those issues are remedied. So anything else you want to add, Virginia, or specifically to that?
I think you just about covered everything. Thanks, Pat. We did send a landscape architect out to the site earlier this week, yesterday, to review the plan and to review what was planted and the state of the current plantings. We did provide that markup to the borough for their review. The public improvement bondings was broken up into 3 categories: E&S controls, pavement and associated improvements, stormwater management, and landscaping. And as Pat said, we are recommending a portion of the landscaping bond be retained until some of the installations are made or corrected, as well as reducing the contingency to 5% in lieu of 10%. So we recommend the borough reduce the total amount of public improvement bondings for the Quattro development on 32nd Street to the amount of $23,268.82.
So in the form of motion, I'll make a motion to reduce the retainage by $23,268.82 for the Quattro Land Development Program.
That's to 23,000, Rich.
We're reducing
Correct.
it to 20.
Thank you.
You want to redo your motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to reduce the retainage for the Quattro Land Development Project to $23,268.82.
Second.
Thank you. Virginia, some of with the landscaping, and I'll look at the designs when I'm at Borough, but it's some of them were short and they weren't covering the things they were supposed to cover. Has that been addressed?
Most of the trees are taller now. It's been a year since our original evaluation. So the first review was in September of 2019. Some of the evergreens are not quite 6 feet tall, but they look like they will be there soon. Some of the trees that aren't the correct caliper, those are the deciduous trees. And some of the perennials still have yet to be installed, but those aren't really related to screening.
Okay. So you're satisfied that the screening plantings are meeting the requests that we had in the original plan?
The installed plantings meet the recorded land development plan, the original landscaping plan, with the exception of the things we've previously discussed.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions?
I have a question. It's probably a little bit broader than the retainage issue specifically, but when the project was being proposed and considered and so forth, a number of concerns were raised during construction, after, on light and traffic and plantings and all that. Have those things all been addressed? Are there still concerns, complaints about things, or is that all been taken care of more or less? I guess that's probably more a question for.
We have received numerous complaints, to be quite honest with you, on the lighting issues over there. Upon investigation, we found out that, and this just recently was found, that this was an employee issue that was going into the room and destroying the light timer, is what it was. They didn't feel that there was a need to turn the lights off, and they were destroying the light timer, so the lights were remaining on 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So that has been totally corrected and dealt with. There was some minor issues with some truck traffic for a delivery, and that I dealt with. Chief Marginson worked with me there with midnight shift, and we were able to take care of that. So those types of things were all pretty much dealt with, and now it seems to be relatively quieter over there, knock on wood. So
the residents are happy then with plantings?
Well, as Virginia said, there's some plantings they're going to have to redo. Some of those plantings, I think it would be more detrimental to rip them out now then, you know, they've been in for a year and they are growing. I think you'll see a bit of a difference as they move along in the next year, that sort of thing. Do I think we're going to make everybody in the neighborhood happy? No, I don't. I'm not naive enough to think that that's going to happen, but I think, you know, we've done a lot of improvements over there. We've worked very closely with the developer to get some things taken care of. As far as, and this is a whole nother subject, as you know, there was some money that was put back for traffic calming measures and a study and things like that, and that's already in the works. They'll be coming up here relatively soon. Decision was made to do it during the height of holiday traffic type thing so we could get a more accurate count. So those things will be taking place. And then from there, the recommendations will come out. Then, of course, all of you will get notified as to what's going on, and there'll be motions as to what we're going to do for traffic calming if needed here, there, or around the site.
And that money that we're still retaining will be, the 22,000 plus will be used for those improvements?
No.
No.
No, okay.
We did we did a developer's agreement with Quattro at the time of approval. There's about $33,000 set aside in escrow for the traffic study and corresponding improvements that come out of that traffic study. And to Chris's point, Virginia's team did a quick, Mark Metal, who's Gannett Plumbing's traffic engineer, they did a quick count during the COVID sort of situation and found that the frequency analysis of traffic would not be beneficial towards any sort of pedestrian improvement. So utilizing the Christmas time in that particular area is probably more indicative of a non-COVID related traffic scenario. So that's where we're at with that, and that's how we're going to fund it. And as Chris said, we're in the works with that now, and it'll be done in December, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Chris and Pat.
Yep.
Yeah, good questions. Okay, all those in favor of reducing the retainage to the $23,000 amount, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries.
That's it.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, Alyssa, personnel.
Okay, as Pat mentioned, we are, will have on the agenda for the next meeting, the police union contract. The only other item I have tonight is discussion and possible action to hire Nathan Sellers for the position of patrolman for the Camp Hill Police Department. And so I just share a little bit about Nathan Sellers with you all. He is a resident of Hampton Township, is currently employed as a police officer in North Middleton Township, and certified as a police officer through the PA Municipal Officer Education and Training Commission. He has passed a number of benchmarks successfully: the written exam for entry-level police officer, the physical fitness battery, oral examination, background investigation, etc. He's met all of the qualifications required by our civil service rules and regulations and is eligible for appointment. If he is successfully appointed tonight, his actual hiring will be contingent upon passing the required psychological and medical exams.
And he is replacing a former officer who was terminated. It is not in addition to staff.
Yes, and that former officer, so it was somebody relatively new who was not continued beyond the probationary period. Yes, who was still in the probationary period.
Okay.
So I would move to hire Nathan Sellers for the position of patrolman for the Camp Hill Police Department.
Second.
Did you have a contingency on that a moment ago that you'd want to add to your motion?
Yes, that's a good idea. Sure. So I would move to hire Nathan Sellers for the position of patrolman for the Camp Hill Police Department, contingent upon him passing the remaining outstanding psychological and medical exams per the MPOETC regulations.
Second.
Thanks, Zach. Okay. All right. Any additional questions for Alyssa or for Chief Margison?
Chief, could you explain to us just briefly about the hiring process for a police officer?
Unmute yourself. Pat, can you unmute him?
I can ask him to.
There I go.
Oh,
How's
there.
that?
There he is.
I'm sorry, I kept on tipping it over. Yes, as Alyssa pointed out, your hiring process for police officers is dictated by the borough's civil service rules and regulations. We're required by the Pennsylvania Borough Code to have such civil service rules and regs, and that included a written exam, a physical fitness test, an oral exam, with a group of outside panelists who sat on that along with Lieutenant Kidman and myself, and also a thorough background investigation. So all of those components were conducted, and he did very well in all aspects. The appointment, as Alyssa pointed out, is contingent upon his successful passage of both the psychological and medical exam. So there's a pretty thorough, lengthy process that we have to go through, and he and several other candidates have successfully completed that process. He is an eligible candidate on the civil service list, which was signed by the chairman of the Civil Service Commission about 2 months ago. And this is the candidate that both the mayor and I have recommended to the PPP committee.
And just to clarify, the remaining things that upon which his hiring is contingent are never administered until the offer is made, correct? Like,
correct. We cannot require the psychological or the medical exam until a conditional offer of employment is made. And that's why the appointment by council is contingent upon successful completion of those examinations.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of hiring Nathan Sellers, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Alyssa, anything else for you?
no, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Richard, we've got a meeting coming up.
We do for District Borough meeting on Friday, November 6th at 7:30 a.m. at the Green Room. And I believe the only item on the topic right now is the Eisenhower Elementary School Zone Study.
Okay. All right. It's time for comments from council. I'll follow my my roll call list. Bonnie, any comments for anything else?
No comments.
Okay, Richard?
Looking forward to the Toys for Tots.
Alyssa? Carl?
Nothing for me.
Aaron Vroman?
I just want to thank the gentlemen in the beginning for their public comments and anyone who adds into the end today. I always appreciate new names on the screen attending instead of faces in the audience. I do also want to just reiterate Audrey's sentiment about there are 3 openings on the Rec Commission for 2021. So please send in your applications if you would like to be on the commission. That helps with the volunteering and prepping and organization of the Parks and Rec Department and the volunteer award. And that is all.
Thank you. Zach?
My only, just a question, is Santa Claus still making his rounds this year in the fire truck?
Oh, good question.
It looked like a yes from Mark.
You're muted, Mark. You're pulling a chief.
Right, yep.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Santa will be making the rounds starting the Monday after Thanksgiving. The only difference is there will be no candy handed out due to obvious reasons.
Right.
No
Well,
lifesaver gummies.
At least we get to see Mr. Claus. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, we've reached the second time of public comments. Does anyone have a comment? Please find yourself when you click on participants at the bottom and raise your hand.
Not seeing any.
Okay, before we adjourn, I'm going to make a motion to go to executive session for the purposes of discussing a personnel matter, including the performance of a non-uniformed employee. Council will not return after the executive session and no official action will be taken.
Not seeing any.
Okay, Aaron, you want to adjourn us?
Yes, motion to adjourn this evening.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.